I did start, and I didn't even mean to.
Well, we're live on YouTube early.
I think we're going.
We're
up
almost
and running.
there. We just got a couple more feeds coming up, but we're live on a lot of our streams.
There
currently.
We go.
Is this one going?
It is not. But
It is not.
I hit the button.
There we go. Oh,
there's an error in our broadcast.
I'm not sure what's going on with that.
Can we restart?
Maybe we need to.
And
It's up top.
up top.
Corner.
There.
Right there. And then down at the bottom.
Live.
Sorry for the technical difficulty, everybody. There you go. Huh.
Is it on? Do you have it connected to the internet?
Yeah.
Look, it's not pulling any of it up.
I'm not sure. Well, we have not.
That's your Instagram.
We'll keep going on all of the other stuff. We apologize for the technical difficulties for those of you that are joining us. And we will be live somewhere on my Instagram next week.
Hopefully next week it'll work.
We'll get it figured out. Not sure quite what's happening. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Monday Night Live.
Yes, the best night of the week.
There it is.
Oh, here's my favorite. You had a client today that even said that.
Yep.
You guys
She
know I
said-
love when people say the best night of the week.
They said that they were super excited. They said, it's Monday Night Live. I said, yep. And then she quoted you. So
the best night of the
I
week.
think it's fantastic. So, well, we are excited to join you tonight and jump into our life coaching concepts. And as always, we're trying to come up with concepts that are beneficial and helpful to everyone, giving you some opportunities to have conversations at the dinner table, at the water cooler, as Kate would say, and give us the ability to really talk through some positive things. The way the world is today, we got a lot of scary little negative things going on around us. And so our goal is to provide positive, healthy content to you.
Yes. And tonight we thought we would take things a little bit general to give you guys kind of a little boost. I think in my mind, I just saw just like a little boost, put your foot in our hands right here. And we're just going to help boost you up a little bit.
There you go.
As generally, we're going to talk about how to increase our coping through some of the 8 essential coping skills.
Right. Yes. And so as we do that, we're looking at coping. And as we talked about so many times in all of our other podcasts and webisodes, we're talking about this emotional discomfort, the inability to deal with what's coming at us emotionally. And again, going back to some of these things you heard us say before, we are very globally tuned in and very globally aware. And the one thing that is really impacts me every day is how much stress and anxiety we all carry. Everybody's carrying anxiety, everybody's carrying stress. And a lot of that is due to the fact that we are overly connected to the external world. We're overly connected more than ever before, any time in our generation. So we're seeing a lot of these anxiety disorders. We're seeing a lot of these stress disorders, and we're seeing a lot of these things on the rise because instead of learning how to be able to cope with what's coming at us, we are looking for external things to help us cope. Now, here's why. The world has changed so dramatically in the last 10 years, right? So if we look back to 2011, when most things were very much some texting going on, cell phones were very much just barely kind of coming online. The network the interweb, internet, was still very new. We were about 15 years maybe into the internet or so. And so all of a sudden this faucet got turned on from a faucet to a fire hose. And because we went from a faucet to a fire hose, the amount of information coming at us is extraordinary. And our ability to process all of this information and to process all of these things has become an issue. And for example, a lot of us didn't know, this is a funny thing, but a lot of us did not know as much about each other as we do today.
Mm.
So you think back to even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, if we go back to 2001,
Mm-hmm.
we did not know as much about everybody as we do today.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of people were tuning in, we're watching people's lives, scrolling through feeds, we're watching their vacations, we're watching all these things. And we developed a false sense of reality. So this false sense of reality was starting to become exposed. We're all in because we believe that whatever's on the screen is true.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that if you watch it on the screen, it's true. And especially from my generation, the Walter Cronkite generation, where the news was the news and it was honest. They didn't make stuff up. They're the only places that made things up were the tabloids. You knew
Mm-hmm.
who they were, the National Enquirer, the
Right.
Star. You knew it was fake. But when you came across the printed news or the television news, it was always the truth. And now we're living with a world where we don't know what's true anymore.
Oh my goodness.
Where things are showing up in people's feeds, we're having a lot of strife and a lot of contention in families because people believe one way versus another way based upon what they're seeing. People are having fights and families are being torn apart, and it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And so the reality here is we have to step back and find a way to cope. We've got to find healthy ways to develop these coping skills. So along the way with this explosion, with this fire hose of information that's been coming at us, our coping skills have been retarded. They have been delayed. They have been held back.
Mm-hmm.
And so our coping skills have not developed as rapidly as the media has. And as a result of that, we're seeing a lot of people struggling with addictions, struggling with avoidance, struggling with dependencies, and getting caught up in a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression and a lot of stress. And so I kind of laid the groundwork.
Yeah,
I've
I
gone
love
on
it.
a rant for
I love it.
about almost 5 minutes now. And so I'm going to let you chime in.
Well, I love that you brought that up, Dean, and to kind of, I don't know, add insult to injury is what came into my mind, but that's not correct, the statement here. But to add another layer inside of that is that with all of this advancement that we've had, and I love that you bring our glass window into it in the way that our world is right now. But not only is our inability to cope out there, but then we add more and more avoidance, right? More and more numbing out, more and more sweeping things under the rug, pretending like they're not there, like pretending everything is okay, looking the other way, and just trying to keep on with life and not really standing in the emotion, not really standing in the experience, not really having the difficult conversations or like getting into solution seeking and just only being in conflict, right? Like that, in my experience and in watching our world over the last while, seems to be the norm and status quo instead of actually coping with things, actually healing things, actually moving through the experiences that we are all experiencing, moving into better understanding. We've had lots of conversations over the last month or so in Monday Night Live about solution seeking and creating win-win and really using your voice and not just adding to the cacophony, but being a part of the symphony of change and all of that. Remember?
Yep.
Yeah. So we've talked about this a lot. And so tonight we really wanted to get into a few of the 8 essential coping skills that we here at Turning Leaf through the book that you and Lee Kelly wrote called The Key, by the way. Justin Clark, wherever you're at, throw that link right in here because I know you're my homie and you're going to do it for me.
There you go.
Because you can get The Key on Amazon or you can march yourself right in here to our office. We have lots of them on hand to be able to have for you. But it's a beautiful journey that a young man named Isaac goes on. And he learns about the 8 essential coping skills.
Right.
And coping skills is exactly what we need right now. You know, we've just come out of the 20th year memorial of 9/11 here in America. If you're watching this in a different country, right? But here in the United States, we've just spent a time in, why am I getting emotional about this? But in remembering the terrorist attack that we had in New York City. And I loved so many of the beautiful, thoughtful, incredible posts that I saw coming up through the weekend in remembrance of that really difficult time. And one of the most impactful ones that I saw was in speaking about our nation and really our world at the moment, in how, yeah, 9/11 was a really hard day. But the posts that I loved were about 9/12 and about the way that we treated each other on 9/12 and the way that we really dug in together as Americans and as humanity and in society, and just people loving people, complete strangers praying for people they don't even know, praying for help and healing and peace and all of the things, going out and doing all the humanitarian service and really getting in and doing that. And that's the kind of world that we want to be living in. I know that about everybody watching. That's the kind of world each and every one of us want to be living in. And the way that we can get into that world better is to be able to cope with everything that we have better, to actually create solutions. So here we are talking about coping skills tonight. Justin did it. My man, he did it.
He's got it on one of our feeds.
If you're not watching Facebook, Turning Leaf's Facebook, that's where the link is. Go grab it.
Right.
I'll put it in all of them when we're done. But
and I love that you actually brought up one of the coping skills that people really leaned on, which was prayer.
Yeah.
And so one of our coping skills that we talked about is meditation and prayer. Mm-hmm. And meditation and prayer are ways of us really connecting to our spiritual center and our spiritual self. And that was one of the things, as you put, that was very, very much evident as a part of that process. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we found that really came out of that experience was a lot of people started communicating better. Yes. And communicating love. And this is another coping skill of communication, is a coping skill. Mm-hmm. And some of us are really good at communicating. Some of us are very articulate. Some of us have a cacophony. I love that. A cacophony of words that we can rely upon and have a very in-depth vocabulary and way of speaking. And this is a very, then we have individuals that are still working on it, and they're working to become better communicators. So as we kind of step into this, we also have to recognize that with all of this information that's been coming at us, there's two things. I always say there's two things that sell, right? We know one thing that sells is what?
Sex.
Sex always sells, right?
Every time.
They spin everything, they make it sexualized, they sexualize memes, they sexualize people, they sexualize animals, anything they can find, they sexualize it. But the other thing that sells, which is really intriguing to me, is fear. Mm-hmm. Fear and sex are the two things that sell. The reason sex is more popular is because people don't have as much fear around sex unless it's how they feel about being valued or cared about. And then there's a lot of fear. But the fear is another thing that gets preyed upon very, very heavily. And with our social media world, fear has been the biggest advertiser. Mm-hmm. If you ever notice, a lot of ads are very negative, based on, if you don't want to look like this, watch this ad.
Yes.
If you scroll here to find the top 10 things that are destroying your marriage, or and it's this negative spin of fear that has really caused us to click on it, because fear is like the car wreck that nobody can stop staring at. Everybody will slow down. Everybody will look at it. Nobody wants to touch it. Everybody wants to drive by it with the windows up. Nobody wants to actually get out and do something about it. But it's that fear and anxiety that we've been wrestling with and struggling with in our world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so because we have that fear and anxiety, the two things that really are pushing this is guilt and shame. And our social media world is really shame-based. And so because there's so much shaming going on, it stifles one of our communication or our coping skills of communication. Right. The best way to get people to stop talking is to shame the heck out of them. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be able to use the coping skill of communication regardless. Mm-hmm. We have to use our coping skill of evidence to really see that we're okay and that the world is loving and the world does want to hear from us. We need to use some of these other eight essential coping skills in order for us to really move through a lot of what's holding us back.
Yeah, totally. And well, I love that you just brought that one in because you said move through, right? Which is one of my favorite coping strategies, which is movement.
Yes.
And in fact, I was talking with an incredible young woman today who has just been like moving her life forward like no one's business, and it's so exciting
Yeah.
to be able to witness that, right? Because in this space of being afraid to speak, right, and of being afraid that we're going to be shamed and being lost in like a hopeless, helpless kind of place, right? We feel stuck. We feel pushed into a corner that we have no options and we just have to like accept it or pretend like turn our eye to it or something, when really just taking that next step forward and moving our life in the direction that we want it to go, moving a relationship in the direction that we want to go, moving, I mean, you can apply this to any aspect in your world, right? Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, like any movement forward is going to start to produce all the evidence. Here's another coping strategy that you can do it, right? I feel like that's a huge piece in our inability to cope is we just don't think that we can.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We don't really see any other options, but really you're not going to see other options until you move yourself and see a new perspective.
Right.
Be able to have a different vantage point in your life to be able to then move again and shift again and begin to get, it's like putting WD-40 on like a really squeaky hardened up wheel. Like we just got to get this bad boy moving forward a little bit instead of being stuck and stifled in so much fear. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. And that's what's really affecting a lot of our anxiety. Anxiety is a fear-based emotion. Our anxiety is the fear of the future,
right,
or the fear of what we can't control. And so a lot of us out there that are struggling with anxiety and struggling with that are really focused. Our focus, which is another coping skill, our focus is on all the things that make us uncomfortable. Our focus is on all the things that are going to potentially hurt us, scare us, make us uncomfortable. And it's, you know, one of my favorite things. I just remember being in my early 20s, and I remember I was on a service, performing service in the world. And as I was out there, I remember getting so scared about my adventure. And I was about to get on the plane, and I had this adult pull me aside and say to me, "Dean, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the worst thing that can happen?" And I just verbalized what was in my head. And it was interesting because the minute I verbalized it, I'm like, oh, wow, that really was not as big as I thought it was. Yeah. But that communication about what I was focusing on helped me let it go. And then I was able to get on a plane and go spend some time and give service in the world. And so this is that idea of, are we really looking at how we move through the fear? Are we able to see our relationship with the fear? Are we able to use our coping skills and use our coping strategies to push through the fear and the discomfort, to really liberate ourselves and to liberate those around us? Because the more I stop communicating, the more I don't communicate, the more it affects all my relationships. And that's the one thing I've watched is people come and sit on my couch, especially my couples, when I'm doing the couples work. It doesn't matter the gender. It doesn't matter the dynamic of the relationship. It doesn't matter if they're married, not married, if they're same sex. It doesn't matter. They all struggle with the fear of communicating and the vulnerability that comes with it. Yes. And as a result of that, when we can start getting the communication going, we can start articulating, all of a sudden the fear goes away. And all of a sudden we start making progress in these couple coaching sessions. And we find relief and release using the coping skills.
Yes, absolutely. And that is the end goal, right? And that's when you know that you're applying a healthy coping strategy is when it produces healthy results for you.
Yes.
When it brings resolution to that conflict, when it creates another solution, when it gives you a new perspective, when it moves your life forward in the direction that you want to go, it doesn't keep you stuck any longer, right? And when you're in avoidance and applying a different coping strategy that keeps you stuck and stifled, then you're not actually coping.
Exactly.
You're in avoidance.
Yep, exactly.
And so that is our challenge to you this week, dear friends. I almost said my loves because that's how I speak in my groups, right? My loves is start really digging into your coping strategies, seeing the places. Dean, I love that you brought up communication again because I honestly, in like linking this to the 4 steps to confidence, one of the best healthy risks that I always challenge people to do is freaking communicate.
Yep.
Like it is one of the scariest things that we do, right? So get out there, communicate, move your life forward just 1 inch to get a new perspective so you can find more faith and hope, right? Begin to dig into that place of focus. Where are you like fixated on? And how then can you just apply a new coping strategy and move forward?
Absolutely.
Woo!
Well, as always, thank you for liking and sharing our videos. Thank you for commenting. We didn't get to all the comments
I know,
tonight,
you guys were amazing.
but we sure appreciate you. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you next week on
Monday Night Live.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.